in someone's face, none of this, all this silly feeling stuff. So all of that combines that I think that the socialization narrative for men, cis men, hetero men, is very, very different than it is for girls. That said, since there's more than enough narcissistic women out there, that there's still that socialization is not going to stop that track for girls. But I think for a girl, that's almost like if a boy and a girl were teetering, the girl may actually, because she might have different kinds of emotionally held peer relationships. Her father, who might have yelled at the son for crying, might actually hold her and hug her. So she might learn a different kind of an emotional regulation and vocabulary.
Do you think there's any correlation between being self-absorbed and being a narcissist? Like somebody who posts a bunch of selfies, for instance, like do you think that they're more likely to be a narcissist?
The research is interesting. There's many research studies that have been done that look at the association between the posting of selfies and narcissism. And not surprisingly, there's a strong association, right? And so, but here's where we have to be careful. Just because the two are correlated doesn't mean they're the same thing and doesn't even mean that one causes the other, right? What it means is that one might be a little bit of a marker for another. Show me a narcissist, and I'll show you a bunch of selfies or a lot of self referential, self absorbed internet content, but not always. And you can also show me someone who posts selfies, and I'll say, I don't know, this is a person who loves posting cupcakes or adores their dog or cat. You can look at the nature of the content and all of that, but at some level, we have to be very careful. Just because a person posts a selfie, it doesn't make them narcissistic, even if they post a lot of selfies and they're annoying selfies. But if when they show up as a person, they're well regulated, they're kind, they're empathic, they're self aware, they're not narcissistic. They just like posting selfies.
Yeah, because I've often heard that narcissism can be a spectrum as well. I would love to know your thoughts on this and the difference between somebody who's like narcissistic, like, maybe somebody who likes to take a lot of selfies, excessive selfies, very self-absorbed, very like all about me, me, me. But that doesn't necessarily make them a narcissist. What signs do you look for to tell the difference between somebody who's narcissistic versus like has the personality disorder?
So the narcissism is on a spectrum, right? And I'll get to the personality disorder issue in a minute. At the mild end of the narcissism spectrum, you have people who are what you just called self-absorbed. They're emotionally immature. They are attention seeking. They're sort of Instagram narcissistic. They're kind of harmless. They're annoying, and there's probably no likelihood of a deep, enduring, healthy, mutual relationship with them. It would be a sort of vapid, childish relationship, right? Are they mean? Probably not. At the far end, the severe end of the narcissism spectrum, that's where we see more of the malignant narcissistic patterns: coercion, exploitation, meaning taking advantage of other people, manipulativeness, isolation, are really the menace, power, domination, control are the key dynamics in the relationships. Now, those people at that end, you're looking at patterns that look more like domestic violence, domestic abuse. It can almost be dangerous. Most people are dealing with folks in the middle. It's not quite the cotton candy of the mild narcissist. It's definitely enough to really sort of for these relationships to be psychologically exhausting and destabilizing and uncomfortable. But it's people in the moderate narcissistic relationships won't say, I'm scared of this person. They're like, I do get sometimes afraid of what their reaction will be if I'm going to disappoint them, but it's not like it is in the really severe relationships. But then there's the issue of narcissistic personality disorder. And that's what's causing also a lot of the mess in the internet conversation. Narcissistic personality disorder, like all personality disorders, takes a minute to diagnose because a personality disorder is a stable, pervasive, persistent pattern over a long period of time that colors most of a person's interactions with the world, and it tends to be maladaptive by definition. Narcissistic personality disorder probably only affects 1 to 6% of people in the population, depending on the research study you look at. It is a relatively new diagnosis. And when I say new, it only came into the DSM in 1980. And the problem is that in order for that diagnosis to be delivered, a clinician has to have spent time with this person and has to have evaluated them. And we need enough time with the person. This is what I do for a living, and it would take me a minute. This is certainly not a diagnosis I'd generate in the first session, but to be frank with you, I may never generate it because it's also a stigmatizing diagnosis. And not even just because we think that they're not nice people, but and rightfully so, the literature suggests it can't really change. So insurance companies don't like it. that record can follow people through systems who are like, "Woo, that makes me uncomfortable." I have to be mindful of that as a clinician. So I think there's a lot of people out there walking around with NPD and it gets called something else. So to me, there's not we don't even use it well. And I've done research studies where we've used diagnostic instruments. And even then I'm scratching my head when I look at the results. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, And so it's a but so I think that this idea of I think personally, if I ran the world, and I absolutely don't and never will, I'd get rid of the NPD diagnosis. I don't think it works. I don't think it helps. I don't think it tells us anything, and nobody really uses it right in the first place.
We talked about at the beginning how to spot a narcissist, and we've spent the last few minutes talking about a lot of the nuance in that conversation and how, it's not necessarily, black or white. And you also mentioned that it can take like 6 to 12 months for somebody to fully realize they're in a relationship with a narcissist. Other than like spotting some of these tendencies that you said to look out for with people, like what are some of the symptoms of the relationship if somebody's in a narcissistic dynamic within the context of that?
Well, something that's going to show up relatively early in the game, and love bombing can last anywhere from 6 to 8 months, but even during the love bombing phase, you're going to see the slipping in of gaslighting. Right? Because ultimately a narcissistic relationship is a power play. That's what it is. And their motivation in a relationship is power, dominance, control. Your motivation in a relationship may be love, affection, and closeness. You ain't playing the same game. So they're trying to dominate you. And gaslighting is one of the best ways to do that with someone, right? You destabilize their reality, then you destabilize them by telling them there's something wrong with them. Rinse, lather, repeat. You do that enough times, a person completely loses, they're completely doubt themselves. Why? Because they love the person. If you started to gaslight me, I don't know you well enough. I'd be like, I'll just turn off my computer. I'm like, I'm out. But if we were close to each other, if you're a family member, if you're a partner, if you're a good friend, I would have a connection. I'd have an attachment and I'd want to continue maintaining that, right? So to maintain that, I'm going to make allowances. And what might I do? Maybe they didn't mean that. Maybe I did put the keys in the wrong place. Maybe I did never say that. Maybe I'm just being too suspicious. And slowly but surely, the person being gaslighted starts to internalize responsibility for anything that's going wrong in the relationship. So that's probably one of the most insidious dynamics, and it shows up early. A gaslighter is testing the water. If you know what gaslighting is and you kind of start stepping away at the relatively early signs of it, the relationship isn't going to last long.